ASEAN is one of the most diverse regions in the world undergoing rapid economic growth. It is currently the world's seventh largest economy and is expected to become fourth in 2030. However, countries continue to face adverse natural events that is becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change. Immediate action is required to counteract the growing disaster losses. With this direct effect of climate change on disasters, linking disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation becomes a necessity. Linking integrated hazard and risk assessments with future climate projections can help disaster risk reduction and other developmental planning domains give appropriate solutions to address future risks. To forge a more resilient and inclusive future, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, through the ACDM Working Group of Prevention and Mitigation, with support from the Government of Japan through the ASEAN-Japan Integration Fund, is partnering with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, and CTI Engineering to implement the project on disaster risk reduction by integrating climate change prediction into risk assessment through pilot projects. This is in support of the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response Work Program 2016 to 2020. Climate change is occurring earlier and more rapidly than expected. Even at the current level of 1 degree Celsius warming, it's alarming. A major part of the population in the region lives in riverine and coastal plains, vulnerable and subject to periodic and extensive hazards such as flood. Every year, the region faces persistent challenges. More than ever, we need to protect the ASEAN people from disaster, to advocate and promote a shift from disaster response towards building disaster-resilient communities.
I live here with my 2 children. This is the worst flood experience in the last 5 years. Our home was submerged in floodwaters. Every year, the area is frequently affected by seasonal flood. I lived here for the past 56 years, stayed at the temporary evacuation centers at least 8 times. The 2018 has been by far the largest in my living memory.
Building on the vast experience and knowledge in the region, we will continue to build on these efforts towards a disaster resilience ASEAN community. While a number of good practices were identified in the previous project, risk assessment and risk mapping methodologies was identified as a priority for the region.
This project intend to support and improve the disaster risk reduction system in ASEAN region. In order to achieve that purpose, we would like to do the 3 components. One is to synthesize the progress report on effective implementation of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. And second one is to implement the pilot project in Myanmar and Laos in order to demonstrate the integration of the climate projection into flood and landslide risk assessment, and then preparation of the risk mapping. And then finally to develop the guideline and training module for integrating climate projection into flood and landslide risk assessment.
The 20-month project consists of 3 main parts: inception, meeting and seminar, 3 field surveys on pilot sites in Laos and Myanmar, 4 case visits in Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Japan. The learning journey kicked off in October 2018 and will roll out for 20 months until May 2020. Reducing disaster risk and building resilience are core aspects of the project. The project demonstrates the integration of climate projections into flood and landslide risk assessment through implementing pilot projects in 2 ASEAN countries. We selected Bago and Tonji in Myanmar, Phukun in the north region of Laos, and Saravan, Sekong, and Champasak in the south region of Laos.
Selection of Lao PDR and Myanmar as the pilot countries for this project is very pertinent because of the vulnerabilities in these countries. Laos and Myanmar are suffering frequent landslides and floods. but also due to the poor infrastructure and limited socioeconomic development in many areas, it makes them highly vulnerable to the impacts of these disasters. So the project in itself would deliver abilities and capacities to increasingly address these frequent disasters in these countries. Additionally, both Laos and Myanmar is in the process of upgrading and improving their disaster risk reduction processes. Laos PDR has already to some extent mainstreamed disaster risk reduction in its current socioeconomic development plan, but implementation and actually putting it into practice still needs some additional work. And likewise, there's an ongoing effort in Myanmar to upgrade and improve its ability and its institutional capacity to deal with disasters.
The challenge in many countries includes unavailability of data, lack of technical capacity, and lack of human resources.
Now we are at the stage of baseline study and data collection. For the disaster risk assessment, we need a lot of data and information, such as socio-economic, natural, and hazard conditions. However, data is always scattering in the ministries, agencies, institutions, and communities at each sector and level of the organization. I think information sharing is very important for the risk assessment. I hope through this project, everybody understands the importance of information sharing and go toward establishment of something good system or idea to do it.
Integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation into development plans will address threats of climate change in an effective manner, since they set an enabling risk governance environment for long-term risk reduction. Through this project, we hope to build adaptive capacities at multiple levels, from a national level to local communities, toward achieving long-term resilience, adaptive governance, and accelerate the adoption of knowledge and practice for land use planning.